going to draw back from the sweet tones of Herb Albert's trumpet and get back to November 22nd, 1992. And immediately following his last appearance, Mr. George Knapp is back again right here on Dark Matters Radio, brought to you courtesy of UFOs Tonight.
Well, last week my guest was award-winning television journalist George Knapp, the man that was responsible for bringing the story of Robert Lazar to the world. And we had such a fantastic program, and there were so many points and so many areas that we didn't get to cover that I asked George if he would come back this week, and he very graciously agreed. And joining us in Las Vegas is George Knapp. Good evening, George.
John, a pleasure to be here.
And I want to thank you for being able to make it because, as probably most of the public don't know, you're not feeling very well tonight.
Well, I just hope it's my sinuses and not my personality that sounds stuffy.
Well, speaking of sinuses, George, how are things down in Las Vegas?
Just fine. Real busy. As some of your listeners may not know, I'm working for a company called Altamira Communications now, and we're preparing a whole series of what I think will be state-of-the-art kind of documentaries on the UFO topic, and it's very exciting.
Well, that's one of the things that I wanted to mention with you this evening and wanted to bring it to the public's attention. Since you left KLAS Channel 8, a lot of people have been of the impression, George, that you've dropped out of sight, but that's not actually true. What are you folks working on now?
Well, a whole bundle of stuff. I think one of the most exciting things we're working on deals with some new information from Russia. We have an associate who's in the former Soviet Union, and as your readers, your listeners probably know, KGB archives on a variety of topics have been opened up to the West for the first time. I have fairly reliable information that documents and even films may soon be obtained, which I think will prove that there has been contact between Earth governments and aliens of some sort, that technology has been obtained from them, that crashes have occurred and recoveries, and that the U.S. government has hidden these facts from the American public. The irony of it is, I think we could end up learning more about what our government knows about UFOs from the Russians than we will ever learn from Washington. I hope to be going to the former Soviet Union in the next few months.
All right. My name is Don Ecker. My guest this evening is Mr. George Knapp, award-winning television journalist and former news anchor with KLAS Channel 8 in Las Vegas. You're listening to us if you're in the 818-213 or 310 area code. George, it's funny that you should mention information coming out of the Soviet Union, and especially from the KGB archives. A number of months ago now, probably fast approaching a year, the Los Angeles Times ran a story which I still have back in our records at UFO Magazine in reference to several television production companies vying for the rights for the KGB archives. At the very end of the story, they in fact mentioned UFOs, and we have a former Russian citizen who is now a naturalized U.S. citizen by the name of Paul Stonehill that writes for UFO Magazine from the Russian perspective, and he had some pretty fascinating information that we're following up on right now that appears to show that the former Soviet military in fact have recovered at least one what they called extraterrestrial craft. Do you know anything about that?
I have heard that, Don. I've heard the same information. In fact, what the information that's come to me has suggested that there was some sort of a landing at a prearranged site, that this landing may in fact have been filmed, that there was official contact between the Russian government and whoever these people are, these beings are. I also have information about documents dating back to the Stalin era, which I think will verify not only the reality of the Roswell crash, but also the reality of an MJ-12 type organization being created. I don't have those documents in my possession. I haven't seen them personally, but I have been in contact with people who have seen them, and it's very exciting. I've heard the same stories you have about the recovery of alien technology from crash sites. My associate over there is in contact with people who are analyzing material that they say was recovered from these crash sites. Of course, as you and I both know, until we actually see it in our hands, I'm not sure how much credibility we can give it.
Well, absolutely. And the last several years, George, and you would know this probably better than anyone, Las Vegas has become a type of mecca, if you will, for the faithful. Not only, of course, is the Area 51 story down there and still going strong, but also the Robert Lazar story. And you've had a chance to meet many of the luminary coming through there, haven't you?
Well, I sure have, and it's interesting. I think it's about 3 years ago this month that it really started, when our report started, and it hasn't tapered off a bit. A lot of the people who come to Area 51 to look for whatever the heck it is that's flying around up there come from your neck of the woods, Southern California. Official expeditions, a lot of them just come out on their own. There's a little place called the Alien up there in Rachel, Nevada. They have a guest book where people have come from all over the world and signed in. I mean, Europe and Australia and Japan. And, it's interesting to me that the interest in that area hasn't dropped off a bit.
Okay, George, the telephone calls have already started to come in, and then I want to ask you about something, as a matter of fact, that involves a group out of Southern California, and something that, in fact, may have some legal ramifications. But let's take this first call. We have Rick from Sylmar. Is that King Cable, Rick?
You got it right.
Okay. How are you doing this evening?
Good. Yourselves?
I'm doing fine, and I'll tell you what, I think we just lost our guest. We're going to have to get him back.
All right. Sounds good.
Did you have a question?
I have a question. I definitely have a question for you and Mr. Knapp. That's one thing for sure. I hope we can get him back on.
Yeah, we'll get him back on.
Okay, well, my question is, Mr. Ecker, this one thing, I have recorded a lot from, of course, the show sightings, and, of course, Unsolved Mysteries, and, of course, from my other sources and stuff. Really good footage of discs, definitely what you can see as a craft, in the sky moving around.
Uh-huh.
Especially over the Area 51 cases, you can actually see discs doing tremendously weird feats. Why can't we use this videotape as, and use it and present it, as evidence for the actual usage of either our own craft used by the military, by perhaps alien technology, or, of course, being just alien itself over just the landscape of Area 51. I mean, can't we use this as actual evidence of the aliens being here, or of our own advanced technology? I mean, can't that, be used?
Well, that's an excellent question, Rick.
Because, especially the Gulf breeze and some of the other stuff, that, if we can use stuff from, like Belgium, some of the cases that they've been having, they've been over.
Well, there have
some
been
of the others.
Right, there have been a number of people that have filmed some anomalous lights out there, normally and usually in the evenings. As a matter of fact, back in April, NBC News had their Pentagon correspondent out there, and they filmed some things. At the very best, I think we have George back here. Hang on one second.
All righty.
Okay, George,
are you back? Yes. Hello?
Okay,
Hello?
Are you back?
Yes.
Oh, great. All right. I'm sorry about that. We lost you there. Are you still there, Rick?
I'm still here.
Okay, we have Rick on line one, George. He was asking why can't some of this film that's been filmed out at Area 51 showing anomalous lights be used as evidence that something, in fact, strange is going on?
Especially with the way some of them have been, filmed. They've been doing them like straight loops around in circles right in front of the mountain. You can see it. I have it on video. I've recorded it off sightings in a few other cases. Other shows on television.
I started to say that the Air Force would deny that anything strange is going on out there.
Yeah.
And it is an open secret that this area has been used for research development. What do you think about that?
Well, I know for a fact that the Air Force has denied not only to the public but also to high-level congressional folks that they've got anything of the nature that's been described flying around out there. In fact, the evidence suggests there's an entire family of advanced propulsion, strange-looking flying saucer, call it whatever you want, type aircraft out there. I hate to throw cold water on those folks who are going out in that area looking for alien kind of technology, but I suspect that if in fact they did have alien technology out there and were tested flying it for a while, I'm not sure that that's what people are seeing. I mean, it makes no sense to me that they would still have it out there in light of the sheer numbers of people who go out looking for it on almost every night.
Very, very understandable.
All right, was that it, Rick?
You got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, and thank you, and make sure you tell your friends about it.
Keep up the good work, you guys.
Okay.
All right.
George, one of the questions that I've had, and I have not been able to get anyone to answer it, especially to my satisfaction, are with the number of people that have been going out there, and we have one group here in the Los Angeles area that are called the Secret Saucer Base Expeditions. You may have seen them out there, as a matter of fact. And they have been apparently harassed by the armed guards that are patrolling the outside area around Area 51, which I believe are employed by the Wackenhut Security Corporation. We've had instances where individuals have been buzzed at below minimum height by military helicopters. In several cases, these people have come back to Los Angeles, have gone to the federal prosecutor, and have attempted to file some type of legal action, and they refuse to hear the case. They've gone to the state attorney general in Nevada. They've gone to the county prosecutor. None of these people will hear this. Do you have any idea on that? I know with all the work that you've done out there that you've had to have encountered these questions.
Well, certainly, the idea that the Air Force, the military, would not be very cognizant of civilian authority is pretty clear in the fact that they seized those 89,000 acres surrounding Groom Lake in 1984, even before they had legal authority to do so. There have been numerous incidents that have come to my attention about confrontations between these Wackenhut or Delta Force or whoever the heck they are and private citizens. Even though it's public land surrounding that area, it's BLM land, Bureau of Land Management. I know that people have had cameras and video gear seized. They've kept it in one case for more than a year and haven't returned it. I know I have in possession video of a helicopter coming very close to a private car, buzzing them, trying to chase people out of there. I know there have been threats. It's a bad situation, but you have to remember this is the middle of Nevada. It's a rural area. And maybe justice doesn't move as quickly as people from Los Angeles or big urban areas might be used to.
Well, you know, I was a police officer and carried a badge for over 10 years, and it's been my experience that the law is the law regardless of where it's at. We're within the borders of the United States. Has anyone approached the FBI about this, or perhaps some of the military organizations that would be involved with military justice?
Well, I know that Gary Schultz from your area there, Don, has approached the U.S. Attorney in Southern California to try to file charges, but that basically went nowhere. I know that as of last week, they have some new signs up there that suggest anybody who goes past these signs that lethal force is authorized in dealing with people who are trespassers. That's a pretty potent statement to put on a sign.
Well, not only is it potent, but it seems to say something about constitutional guarantees as they're practiced in Nevada.
I don't think the military, in some regards, is all that concerned about constitutional guarantees. I remember when they seized the land, the 89,000 acres, they later went to Congress to get permission to do something they'd already done. There was a Congressman, John Seiberling, who put the question to the Pentagon, what authority do you use to seize this land? What authority is higher than the laws of the United States? And the guy's response was, well, I can answer that, but only in a closed briefing. I sure would like to know from Congressman Seiberling or someone else exactly what kind of rationale he gave behind closed doors.
All right. George, if you could hold on for just a moment, we have to take a break, and as soon as we're back, we're going to continue with this. We are back, and we have a call from, it looks like Richard in Vista. Is that Vista, Richard?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, good evening. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm just doing great. I'm really interested in all this UFO stuff, and one of the things that curiouses me that a lot of UFO buffs don't really think about is, have you ever reversed the situation and looked at it as being an alien coming here to this planet? How many different rules and regulations and just dealing with the UN in general, probably how they would have to deal to set up and start any kind of a business or any kind of trade with human beings on this planet. The paperwork would be fantastic. I mean, that's probably why they don't come down. You know, I mean, they don't want to fill out paperwork. They don't want to pay taxes and all this stuff. You know.
Well, that's a heck of a thought, Richard. I'll give you that.
I'll tell you what, Richard.
The other thing that I was wanted to say is that I don't think that the government is ever going to officially say anything about UFOs. Now, what it's going to take, I think, is there's a lot of information that's put into computers these days. What it's going to take for somebody that's really good at computer hacking to hack into somebody, to hack into the defense computers and perhaps the computer that I understand that's over in Belgium is supposed to be the beast and everything. Get the telephone number of that guy and get a hold of him and get the hard data on this stuff and then publish it. And that's the only way you're really going to find out what's going on.
Well, then you're looking at a number of federal laws that would be broken, Richard. And the big question is, who would want to end up spending years and years in jail because they broke into somebody's computer? That's something that we could never advocate to anybody because that person would be putting themselves in one heck of a fix.
Richard, I might address part of your question.
Well, when the people behind the government that are running the thing don't go by what the Constitution says, and you've got in effect lawlessness from the government itself. So,
what do you think about that, George?
One or two individuals who may hack into the system,
George, what do you think about that?
Well, a couple of things. As far as the cosmic implications of this whole thing, I'm not sure that I deal with that as well as I'm more interested in the government's reaction to the phenomenon than the phenomenon itself. I think I would explain it this way. I'm more of the drive-in movie theory that they would never have to fill out paperwork because they come near, they treat Earth like a drive-in movie because they find us so interesting, cruise into our neck of the cosmos on Friday nights to check us out. As for whether or not the government will ever release the information, I'm not sure they have to, and I don't think your listeners, Don, have maybe thought of it this way, but they've got all these things flying out there at Area 51, things like some witnesses describe it as a TR-3A, like a black manta. They've got some huge boomerang-type craft with no operational name, something called Aurora, which is a methane-powered hypersonic Mach 7 replacement for the SR-71, things that all look like flying saucers. When the government can create its own flying saucer-type vehicles, it will be in a position to explain away all future UFO sightings. I don't think there's ever going to be a release. I don't think they're ever going to come clean.
Well, that's a pretty sad commentary.
I agree with him. They will probably never release any information, and the only way you're going to get any information is to break into somebody's computer.
Well, if you decide to do something like that, Richard, send us a card from Leavenworth, and I'll be interested to hear what you may have found out.
All righty. Well, it won't be me because I don't know enough.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Somebody out there in the audience might catch on to what I'm trying to say, and they'll get in there.
Okay, thank you. And we have Bert from Burbank on Salmon's Cable. Good evening, Bert.
Howdy there, Don. Thank you for your call back with me. I got to get back with you later this week. I got two very good important questions for the both of you. George, you were mentioning the Soviet connections and things going on over there. I'm interested in your opinion about with the new relationship with the United States with the Soviets, if we aren't going to be pulling the same thing we've done with some of the other governments around the world and saying, well, if you want any money, any help from us, you better shut up about the UFO material.
Well, I'm worried about that myself, and I've probably already said too much. I would imagine that there are some efforts underway to that extent. But there are a lot of Russians who are facing hard times who will do basically anything, I think, at this point for hard currency. That at least is what I'm hoping. I am also hoping that there isn't any kind of a coup. My friends in Moscow tell me that the possibility of the hardliners coming back is something that exists. It could happen at any time. I think if that happens, we're all going to be cut off from that information again for a long, long time.
How do you feel about that, Don?
Well, I think that this situation is much larger, Bert, than anybody even realizes. And the only thing I can suggest at this time is we're going to have to wait and see what the new administration may have on its mind and on its agenda. If you remember back in 1976, when Jimmy Carter was running for the presidency, one of the things that he stated in his campaign promises was that if he became president, he was going to go in and release everything that they had on UFOs. Now, I have a very unusual piece of information back at the office. I cannot vouch for its validity, but there was an individual that claims to have been on Carter's administrative briefing team, and that when he came out from the briefing, one of the things that he was briefed on, in fact, was the UFO situation. And according to this source, it is not verified. I want to stress that. But he claims that when Carter came out of there, he had tears in his eyes. And, of course, we all know that we never heard another word about UFOs from Jimmy Carter. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens with the Clinton administration.
Right. Let me ask you both some information, again, about the Soviet sightings and so forth. Don and George, are you guys familiar with any connection with the unusual UMO people and some of the saucer sightings out there? And I'll explain later on why.
The UMO?
Right.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it, Bert. The UMO situation is something that occurred a number of years ago in Spain. There have been many questions raised about that particular series of sightings and information that ended up flowing through. There is quite a bit to suggest that it could have been, in fact, some type of intelligence disinformation operation. But, I want to stress the but. In 1989, when TASS released the information on the Voronezh sightings, the kids, some of the kids that witnessed those sightings, those alleged landings, in fact, had the UMO designation on the side of their drawings.
That's exactly the reason I asked the question. Now, George, have you had any experience with your contacts over there mentioning anything about this?
No, I'm sorry, I haven't.
And I would hope at some particular time you might be able to, with those contacts, propose that, because I thought the kids and that insignia in the middle of a place where it doesn't have great communication was a very unusual situation. Not that it couldn't have been faked, but nevertheless, it's something that could be followed up. Okay, guys.
Well, let me ask you a real quick question, Bert. Did you by chance see the Fox television sighting segment on Friday?
Yes, I did.
Okay, did you see that segment on the Soviet Union on Russia?
You bet.
That M
triangle. Yes.
Right. Well, I had a call immediately after that program from our Russian story consultant and writer Paul Stonehill.
Right.
And Stonehill told me that he had been in contact with the individual from Fox Television that produced that segment and had warned him against this particular case because those people, as Stonehill later told me, are the equivalent of the Russian Adamskis and Van Tassels. In other words, that there is not a lot of credibility, allegedly, in that particular case.
Well, and there's something that was very unusual, and this again can be taken a look at with you guys. In that segment, there was 5 or 6 lights that were in a kind of pattern, and they were flowing around. And the main thing that I noticed on that, which was unusual, was the fact, if you look at it again, rather than the lag on a video camera, which with a piece of light trails like a comet, the motion was going towards the tail, and it would be the reverse. So maybe that's something you guys can check on and see if anything's going on there with somebody just panning across backwards some lights or something.
All right. Well, Paul Stonehill did tell me, Bert, that area, in fact, he believed may have been a testing area for Russian experiments in psychotronics.
Psychotronics, yeah.
Exactly.
Love to find out more about that. Okay, guys, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
George, you mentioned Congressman Seiberling. Have you tried to contact him at any time to get his reading on this?
I did a couple of years ago, and I didn't get a response. You mentioned Jimmy Carter. I've also tried to contact him just to get an explanation about why he didn't live up to that campaign promise, and I didn't get a response from him. I am in contact with a number of people on Capitol Hill. I can tell your listeners this much, that there is a great deal of interest at very high levels there in the UFO situation. I think not necessarily in the cosmic implications or who they are or why they're here, but more interested in how agencies of the U.S. government, military agencies, are spending big piles of money and where they're getting it.
Okay, we've got to take another break on the half hour, George, so if you can hold on, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
They confuse the old ways with the best ways of doing those things forever.
The future of radio.
Yeah, we're there, sunshine.
Cyber Station USA.
We're there.
And George, are you still there?
Correct.
Are you holding up?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Looks like we have a call from Mike in Orange County on, is that Comcast cable?
Yeah, that's right, Don.
Okay, good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Mr. Knapp and Mr. Ecker. Don, we really enjoy the show, and Mr. Knapp, we've enjoyed all the work you've done and been with you the past few years since Billy Goodman and all that good stuff. Don, back to your question regarding Gary and Norio's work out there. Well, not the question, but the idea that you brought up regarding the helicopter.
Yes.
I thought you might find this interesting. I know Gary and Norio, and I was on the phone with the FAA inspector out of Nevada area about 6 months ago when they got word. It was the final word. It was the second letter that they received from the U.S. Justice Department stating that nothing would be done. Did you see copies of those letters, Don?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, Gary and I just saw Gary this evening.
Oh, okay.
He was giving a lecture over at Yvonne Smith's Zero Group, as a matter of fact.
Right. Okay.
Gary and Norio have been sending me information on this. I did a news story on the original harassment that they underwent when they were out at Area 51. I tried to personally contact the federal prosecutor, and after calling them a good half dozen times, I ceased. They never got back to me.
Yeah, we had problems with them getting to return calls. I'm sure Mr. Knapp's aware of the work that Mr. Hilder did in sending the letters to the DA out there.
Yeah.
We got in phone contact with her a couple times, and she was very hostile, I would say, at best. In regards to the helicopter situation, I was on the phone with the Nevada FAA inspector, and he basically, I relayed the story to him, and we faxed him copies of the letters. And he, without seeing the videotape, we told him we have the copy of the same one that George was referring to. And I don't know if either one of you knew this, but he basically stated that a 1,000-foot ceiling is mandatory in around any residential area or structure. Now, granted, at the mailbox and Groom Road where this occurred, there is no structure per se in that 3-mile radius as they call for. However, it's still FAA law mandates that they keep a 500-foot ceiling at all times. Now, the law states that a military pilot has to use his own what he called pilot's discretion. However, under pilot's discretion, the military can take a aircraft, fixed wing or rotor, down to within 100 feet or lower. It's completely up to pilot's discretion. And if a complaint was to be filed, and this is what I'm sure George can comment on, there has to be some kind of a tail number or ID number, which everybody knows those copters out there don't carry.
Well, that's very interesting, Mike, but you know, there's one thing that we're all going to have to once again remember, and that is the fact that, yes, you and I and everyone else, we are truly, under our form of government, we are the government.
Absolutely.
And every once in a while we have to remind these folks down in Washington who, in fact, is not only paying the bills, but calling the shots.
Well,
our present administration, the Bush administration, I think, found that out just a couple of weeks ago, that they were unresponsive to the country's needs, to the domestic problems that we as citizens were facing, and that's why we have a new administration coming in just a few weeks. Perhaps it will change. We hope so.
Well, I'd like you, in closing, I'd just like George, in your opinion on something that came up, I guess, in the past couple of weeks. When the naval officer, I guess the homosexual officer that was it was mandated that he be reinstated to service, the federal judge that sat in on that ordered the Navy to reinstate him made a very interesting statement in the actual written finding on the case. and he stated that at no time does anybody in the military, no matter what the structure within the military, have precedence over even the lowest of civilian authorities, including the civilians themselves, because the civilians are the government. And it was with that finding that he ordered this individual to be reinstated in the Navy. I'd like to know what George's idea is and what your idea, Don, on that would be, because I would think that would apply to this UFO issue also.
Wow, I've never heard that before. Obviously, it would apply to the UFO situation, but gosh, I couldn't imagine them actually enforcing that across the country.
Yeah, well, I couldn't either, but I thought it might be interesting for George in his new endeavor to try to look up to see. We're trying to do the same thing, and if I get it, George, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
But we're trying to get the written copy of what the actual case finding was and the order that the judge made, because he did state in the order that it was no military power whatsoever would supersede the right of even the lowliest civilian.
And especially if we're talking about being on public and or private land. However, we all know that in the course of over 45 years, especially when we're talking about the UFO subject, there have been cases where, in fact, the military have come into private property where there have been UFO situations, and they have taken over. A good friend of ours, Dick Criswell, in Indianapolis, Indiana, was trying to track down a case that happened there not more than just a couple of months ago with an alleged cattle mutilation on a private farm. The military showed up there, blocked the area off, allowed no one on or off the property until they completed whatever it is that they were doing there, and then, in fact, took off. And to this day, the last I heard from Dick Criswell, the farmer is not talking. So that's some fantastic. I would like you to keep us advised on what you find out also, Mike, if you could give us a call at UFO Magazine.
Great. And just in closing, I was wondering, last week when you ended the program, I had a kind of an idea that George was going to bring up something regarding somebody by the initials DH that was kind of out circulating in the UFO community stating he was from that area at 51 with photographs, if George knows what I'm talking about.
George, do you know what he's talking about?
Yeah, I do. There's a...
I'm going to hang up. I was just wondering if he could comment on that, because I kind of got the idea last week he was going to say something about it, and you guys ran out of time.
No, I wasn't going to comment on it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Don.
You bet, Mike.
All righty, bye-bye.
Okay, George, tell us, who's DH?
Nothing I can talk about.
You can't talk about it on... Okay, well, I understand that. Well, we have John from Palmdale out of Jones Cable. Good evening, John.
Good evening, gentlemen. How you doing tonight?
Just fine. Did you have a question for my guest?
Yeah, I sure did. I'd like either one of you guys to comment, if you can, on Jacques Vallée's book, Revelation.
You bet. You bet. I'd be happy to, unless you wanted to comment on it.
Well, I can speak in general terms that I have the utmost respect for this guy. I mean, I think he's one of the best thinkers in this whole field, if not the best. It's meticulous research. I really like what the guy says. I think he's forced people like me and Don and others to re-examine the extraterrestrial hypothesis and look at it in much broader terms.
I couldn't add a thing to that, George. You basically took the very words out of my mouth.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, thank you, John. Well, what is your idea, George, for attempting to focus some real hard congressional scrutiny on this? What does it take for in your opinion, for we, the citizens, to make Congress sit up and start fulfilling their obligation and their duties to us, the public?
That's a tough question to ask. For one thing, as I hinted earlier, Don, Congress is taking a look at this situation. But I don't think we can realistically expect them to come out with a full-blown hearing, and I'm not sure that would be all that productive anyway. They're looking at it in a quiet, behind-the-scenes way. I don't think we can expect senators, congressmen to come out and say, I want to get to the bottom of this UFO situation, because we know they would be politically crucified. They'd be ridiculed.
But yet, be that as it may, the more I'm in this, and I've been in this now almost full-time since 1987, and I have interfaced with, I couldn't even begin to count how many people that have come out with some of the strangest, most odd and troubling stories. And I mean, you know yourself that these people cannot all be crazy. I myself had a sighting of something very strange coming back from Las Vegas just a little over a month ago. I spoke to a man this evening that was relaying to me the account of an abduction that he underwent 7 years ago. And he was one of probably, in the last year, maybe 100 people that told me the same thing, that not only did he interface with what he took to be an alien life, but there were also human-appearing individuals on board that partook of this, and he thought for some reason that they were military. I mean, if this is true, or if any part of it is true, it's the most outlandish thing that I've ever heard of, and I know that that's got to hold true for you. What do you suggest we can do? I realize I'm putting you on the spot.
I really don't know. I know that there is sincere interest at very high levels. I also know that they are treating it very cautiously. I don't know if they're afraid of something, but that's the impression that I get, is that they're treading on some mighty big feet, and even these people in Congress are afraid of the forces that they're dealing with. I don't think I can be any more specific than that.
Well, once again, that seems to suggest that we are in fact dealing with an agency outside of our government, but yet it is acting on the behest or behalf of our recognized government. And that doesn't sit kosher with me.
Well, I'd have to agree. I think there is some sort of cabal. You know, we always talk in general terms about the government knows this, the military knows that. It's not the government.
Right.
It isn't the military. It's some sort of a cabal within it. The same way that Oliver North was able to get away with all sorts of hanky-panky people within the military, within the government, pursuing their own agendas that aren't necessarily consistent with the Constitution or with the needs of the people.
Do you think any of this may change for the better or for the worse with the incoming new administration?
You know, I don't know. I'd like to think that, but gosh, Don, how many times have we heard it over the years, you know? Here comes another opportunity to open up the books and let people know what's really going on. I don't know what that briefing is like when the president sits down and people from the Pentagon tell him the reality of the UFO situation. I'd really like to be a fly on the wall and hear that conversation. I suspect that there may be really legitimate reasons why a president, why a military, why a government would not want to reveal the whole story.
Well, there very well may be, but then again, if it bodes ill for humanity as a whole, it would kind of be, in my mind, like Franklin Roosevelt attempting to hide the Pearl Harbor debacle from the American public on December the 7th, 1941.
Well, we all know that that's the way government operates sometimes. I mean, the Gulf of Tonkin, there have been a lot of secrets that they use, sprinkling out information to suit their own policy purposes. It's unfortunate. We don't like it. I think, you know, as a citizen, I feel that I'm ready to learn whatever the heck it is they've got in their files. I'd like to know. But I've also developed a certain sympathy, I think, for the Air Force, for the military, in realizing that maybe what they know, which may not be the complete picture, maybe what they know is going to be very disturbing, would be extremely disturbing to social institutions and society in general.
Okay, let me hit you with another quick question prior to the UFO news commentary. But while you were at Channel 8 down in Las Vegas, George, and you were a recognized first-rate journalist, investigative reporter, and you had ins with not only the police department, with the courts, with the prosecutors, and so forth. How did they react when you questioned them about why they would allow things to happen within their jurisdiction that were obviously illegal? And I'm talking primarily about innocent people, civilians, being harassed out there at gunpoint. Why would they not take some type of stand on it?
I don't want to make Nevada sound like cowboy country, but the part of the state that we're dealing with, Lincoln County, is a rural area. It's a very conservative area. I think they view all the outsiders who come up there looking for flying saucers or UFOs or whatever as a nuisance. And I don't think we're ever going to see a great change in attitude that's going to get people the kind of quote-unquote justice that they think they should have coming.
But any innocent civilian could be driving down that road and encounter some of these security personnel or a helicopter attempting to run them off the road, and here they are just minding their business. Now, I can't believe that the Lincoln County prosecutor would not feel duty-bound or an obligation to protect their rights.
Well, I think as any of your listeners would know if they've been out there, there is a great deal of cooperation between the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department and the security forces that surround Area 51. In essence, these days, what I hear from people like Gary Schultz and Norio, these days, the Sheriff's Department are the people that do the dirty work for the guys from Wackenhut, the Delta Force people.
Right.
They're the ones that intercept camera crews. They're the ones that tell people, don't go any further. They're the ones that threaten folks, if you climb up that mountain with cameras, we're going to seize the stuff. I don't know. I can't explain it. I can't justify it. That's just the way it is out there.
Well, after we get back from the news commentary, George, let's discuss if there's anything that we can collectively do.
Okay.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
Hello, this is Vicki Cooper with a special UFO news comment for Sunday, November 22nd, 1992. 29 years ago today, an assassin's bullet took the life of President John F. Kennedy. Our country is still haunted by that murder in Dallas, and many of us will remain troubled until the final truth is known. A number of dedicated researchers have disproven the Warren Commission's lone assassin conclusion, which pinned the crime on Lee Harvey Oswald. But there are some other kinds of researchers around. Adding to the confusion surrounding the assassination are UFO propaganda artists such as John Lear and Milton William Cooper, both of whom have claimed that Kennedy was killed by the Secret Service agent driving the presidential limo that day, William Greer. Further defiling the information stream, Cooper has alleged that Kennedy was killed because it was discovered the president was about to spill the beans about UFOs. Such outlandish claims are made without a shred of proof. Both the UFO mystery and the Kennedy assassination deserve the attention of research professionals of impeccable integrity. Instead, the loudest voices to scream for truth are those who have done the most to discourage responsible investigation. What the Kennedy assassination and UFOs have most in common is their appeal to paranoid conspiracy buffs and schizophrenics, certainly a most pleasing audience to those who have worked so hard to cover up the truth for all these years. Yet it seems reasonable to expect that by this time next year, Congress and a new Democratic administration will have opened up the assassination files. 30 years will have passed. Now, if only the American people could be certain that those years of unknowing were not in vain, and that those files will contain the absolute truth about the JFK assassination. This UFO news comment has been brought to you by UFO Magazine and the UFO Media Group. We can be reached at P.O. Box 1053. Call 818-9. That's it for now. Thanks for listening. This is Vicki Cooper for the UFO Media Group and UFOs Tonight on the Cable Radio Network.
And we are back. Well, George, with about 6 minutes remaining, what are your suggestions for what the public can do in order to change some of these very troubling policies that we've been beset with for going on now 50 years? Are you there, George?
Yes. One thing I'd say, I don't really know how to explain the lack of interest in this topic by mainstream news organizations, but if your listeners could encourage their own local news operations to get interested in it, I think after some time, a little bit of research, as you would know, Don, if you do just a modicum of research, you'd find out there is a solid body of information there of something really important that's going on, real solid information. And it's going to take the resources of somebody like CBS or Time or the New York Times to get interested to expose this stuff.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that because just several days ago, Channel 13 here in Los Angeles, in fact, did run a story on Area 51. But, you know, it's one thing I have noticed in the years that I've been involved with this, George, and perhaps you have too. It seems like the subject has its own dampening effect on the collective consciousness. It's something that I cannot explain, but yet I've seen it time and time again.
Well, I've thought about it the same thing. It's like people can view these reports, even my own reports, and somehow, because it's on television, they almost see it like, yes, that's very interesting, but they view it as almost a movie of the week or something. Very interesting, yes, that will shake our beliefs right down to the bones, and then just switch the channel and go on. I don't know how to explain that. I think one other suggestion I would have for your listeners certainly is people should read your magazine.
Well, I appreciate that. I think they should too.
I don't want to be too obvious about the plug, but I think it's a reliable source, objective information. When we just heard Vicky referring to these paranoid conspiracy buffs, I think that's the kind of commentary that this field needs, because there's a lot of baloney out there, and it's hard for people, especially people just getting into it, to separate what's real and what isn't.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because next week I'm going to have on as a guest Kevin Randall, one of the two co-authors of the book UFO Crash at Roswell. And I'm sure you know Randall, George. He's been in the field for a number of years now, and between him and Donald Schmidt, they wrote an absolutely first-rate book on the Roswell crash and subsequent cover-up. One of the things that Randall, however, is going to be discussing is some other research that figured into Roswell on a book just published this past year by Stanton Friedman and Don Berliner. And in their book, Crash at Corona, one of the primary witnesses to this alleged event was a fellow by the name of Gerald Anderson. Now, many of the listeners out there may be aware of Anderson's story, but he was, at that time in 1947, a young child of about 5 or 6 years old. And basically, the crux of this particular bit of information is that Anderson witnessed not only alien bodies at this crash site and some survivors, but also a number of other instances that involved the U.S. military coming out and his family being warned to keep their mouths shut and so forth. Now, what's strange about this particular case is the fact that we have just found out this week that 2 months ago, Anderson admitted to Friedman, Berliner, and several other people, including Walt Andrus of MUFON, that he in fact lied about certain aspects of this case. Now, at this point, this is the first public announcement that this, in fact, has some severe problems with it. Why do you feel that some of these researchers, which have a basic obligation to the public to release information like this, when in fact it is necessary, they hold back on it?
Well, I know that the case you're talking about, as you said, it came out about 2 months ago, and I think it will be coming out. I mean, Stanton Friedman is as honest as the day is long. And if he is wrong about Anderson, I am sure that he will be the first one to come forward with that information, and I think he will be. I'd like to speak in general terms about Friedman versus Moore versus Schmidt versus Randall. I don't know Mr. Schmidt or Mr. Randall. I respect the research they've done, but I feel that a lot of this bickering between them and Friedman and others is just unproductive for the whole field. It's no wonder that serious researchers don't want to get involved in this, as much backbiting and nastiness there is in this thing.
Exactly, but all these people, in fact, are considered and are very serious researchers, but yet there seems to be almost as much problem getting these guys to sit down and discuss in a rational, logical manner the things that are dividing them as it was to sit down with the North Vietnamese and decide on what kind of table we wanted to sit at in Paris.
That's exactly right. You know, we don't need an MJ-12 organization to cause disarray in the field of ufology, UFO research, because people do it to themselves, you know. I find it to be extremely unproductive, these personal disagreements. For example, the Roswell thing, I mean, how many times can we prove that Roswell happened? You know, I just think there are more important things. We've proved it over and over. Roswell's real. Something really crashed. It seems like great researchers like those guys, Friedman, could get on to something else.
We're out of time. Thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed this edition of Don Ecker Live.
Well, George, it looks like we did it once again. We ran out of time. I want to once again thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I know how ill you are this evening.
Oh, that's okay. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
That you hung in there. We are definitely going to do this again, George. As a matter of fact, hang on the line here after we get off the air. But I want to tell everybody out there that my guest next week is going to be Kevin Randall. The week following that, Yvonne Smith and a number of people from her Zero group. We're looking forward to it. And, hey, keep your eyes to the skies, and we'll see you in a week.
Okay, well, as you can see, George hung in there until the end of the show. Now, look, he was with Altamira for a while. Then he ended up going back to KLAS. And, of course, these days, George is still there. Not to mention, he also hosts on Coast to Coast, generally once or twice a month, where he continues on with his UFO research and, dare I say it, fascination. Look, as always, you can come right here to Dark Matters Radio for some of the most cutting-edge look at research and what is happening in the field today and in days past. We appreciate your interest. I appreciate the time that you take with DMR, and I especially appreciate hearing from the audience. Okay, until next time, remember to keep those eyes pointed